Today's daf is Menachos daf Samach, and we are 5 lines from the bottom of daf Nun Tes Amid Beis, Amar Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Today's daf is being learned as a schus refuah shalema for Chava Miriam Bas Malka Freda, Shlomo ben Chaya Leah, Baruch Yitzchak ben Shifra Mirol, and Rachel Bas Henya. So we're moving along in Perek Kol Menachos Ba'is Matzah. We're dealing with halachos related to the Minchas Choite and the Minchas Soita, which had something in common, in that there was no shemen and there was no levayna. So we saw the long Mishnah on Daf Nun Tes Amud Aleph. Yesh tu'unoi shemen u'levayna, shemen v'loy levayna, levayna v'loy shemen, loy levayna v'loy shemen, and which menachos have no shemen and no levayna? It's the Minchas Choite and the Minchas Kanai. So on that note, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef said in the name of the great Rabbi Yochanan, Nasan Mashahu Shemen Al Gabi Kazayas Mincha Pasal. As it relates to the lav of putting shemen on a mincha that's not allowed to have shemen, such as a Minchas Choite, so if the kohen would go and he would put even a mashahu of shemen on top of the mincha, but on top of a kizayas mincha, that's when it would be possible. Really, Rabbi Yochanan is saying two chedushim. Number one, the sheer shemen for the iser shemen is a mashu. Number two, the sheer mincha for the iser shemen is a sheer kizayas. So very, very machmer in terms of what the sheer shemen is. Even a mashahu is already asam in Torah, but very, very mekel when it comes to the sheer of the mincha. A mashu of mincha wouldn't be enough for one to be over the lot. It would have to be a kazayis of a mincha. My timer, what's the makar to this? So it's all scriptural. La yasim, it says in the Torah, aleha shemen. La yasim, the word sima is koldo, can mean even anything. Aleha means on a cheftza of mincha, and that's already ad the ikashir. I said, Rabbi Yochanan, I'm just reading the words. La yasim, aleha shemen. La yasim is a kolshu, thus the shir shemen is a kolshu, aleha is a kazayis, thus the shir mincha is a kazayis. From Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef, from Rabbi Yochanan, the same Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef said in the name of the great Rabbi Yochanan, nasan kazayis levayna, al gabi mashu mincha pasal. When it comes to the issa levayna, so there, in order for one to be over the Isser, he would have to put a kazayas of levayna on how much mincha. There already you don't have the shear of kazayas. Even on a mashu of mincha, that would be a problem as well. My timer, what's the reason? Because the language that the Torah uses when it talks about the Isser levayna is a little bit different. It says v'lo yitain olel levayna. Says Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef, the name Rabbi Yochanan innovating. Lo yitain ksiv. It says lo yitain, and lo yitain means ad de'ika nesina. It has to be a cheftza v'nesina, which is a shear. What's the shear? It's going to be a kazayas. Aleha, and the fact that it says aleha, have a riboy achariboy. It's the second mention of aleha. Ve'in riboy achariboy, counterintuitively elole ma'et. And being that it says the word aleha already a second time, so two alehas tell me it doesn't have to be aleha. If aleha, like we saw in the first memra, means a kazayas, so two alehas would be a miyut, and it would teach me even a mashu would be okay. So in contrast to the Isser Shemen, where there it's a mashu of Shemen on a kazayas of mincha, when it comes to the Isser Levayna, there it's exactly the opposite, 180 degrees. It's a kazayas of Levayna on top of a mashu of mincha. The reason there's a nuance between the amount of shemen versus the amount of levayna, that's easy. It says lo yasim regarding shemen, and it says the lo yitain regarding levayna. Sima is a koldahu. Nesina is always a shir chashiv. By the way, this idea that nesina is a shir chashiv is dvarim atikin. The maramakim is a chuvas Na'id Yehuda. When Na'id Yehuda says an unbelievable chiddush, he says that we know when it comes to the mitzvah of truma chita achas peiteres hasakri. But Zakta Na'id Yehuda, that's only with regards to making your tefua not be tevel anymore. But when it comes to the mitzvah of now taking the truma and giving it to the kohen, being that the Torah calls it a nesina has to be a nesina chashuva, like you see in this Gemara right here. And it's for that reason you wouldn't be able to mekayim the mitzvah. Yehuda says a lashon that he was so excited with this chiddush because he doesn't know of anyone that ever said this chiddush. And he was mechadish that chita achas peteres sakri is only klape hafrashas truma, which is part of the mitzvah, which is mata the tefua, and removes the issa tevel. But versus negeya being the mekayim, the mitzvah of giving it over to the kohen, that not, again, very much based on this Gemara. We have rate bites on this, ayin related. But the bottom line is that there's also a chilik in terms of how much mincha one would have to have in order to be over this isser. When it comes to the isser shaman, you need a kazayas of mincha. When it comes to this levayna, even a kolshu, what's it based on? It says aleha with regards to shemen. Aleha means kazayas. When it comes to the levayna, it says aleha. It says it a second time. Ein riboy achar riboy elamai. Now the truth is, it doesn't say aleha twice in the halacha of levayna. It says lo yasim aleha shemen v'lo yitin aleha levayna. So where's the aleha? But Pashib Shad is, that's the way Rashi explains it, that being that it says already Aleha by Shemen, so had it said Lo Yasim Aleha Shemen V'lo Yitain Levayna, it would be understood that the Aleha of Shemen is also referring to Levayna. So when the Torah one time says Aleha by Levayna, it's really a second time, it's Riboy Achar Riboy, Ve'in Riboy Achariyot El Olamait. Iked Amri, some had a different version. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef. It's the same Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef, but by Rabbi Yochanan. He's saying over in the name of the same great Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan actually asked as a Shaila, Nasan Mashu what would be if somebody would put only a mashru of shemen on top of the kazayas of mincha? Would he be over or would he not be over? Now, in the first lishna, yeah, right, that was Rabbi Yochanan's halacha regarding shemen. It says the lashon of la yasim. It doesn't say la yitain. But in the second lishna was in ibaya. And what's the shayla? Maybe inan sima kinasina. Do we say that just like it says nasina regarding levayna, even though here it says sima, but maybe we learn sima from nasina. And if nasina always means chashuva, so too sima is going to mean chashuva as well. Maybe we don't. And in this lishna teiku, we have to wait for Yoah Tishbi to actually be poshed the shayla. Nasan shemen al shiyareha. Tanu Rabbanan, a brais. Lo yasim Allah shemen v'lo yitain oleh levayna. Yachol b'shnei kayhanim. You would think that the only time a person could be over both of these isurin, in other words, the only time a person would get two lavin for putting shemen and levayna on the mincha is in the event that it was two kayhanim that went ahead and did it. If, however, one kayan would go and the one kayan would put shemen and levayna on the mincha, maybe then he would only be over one iser. So the Braisa is addressing a kayan that went, he put shemen and he put levayna. And the question is he over one Isur or two Isurim? On the one hand, La Yasim Aleh Shemen is one, V'la Yitin Aleh Levayna is two. But then again, the Torah puts it together. So maybe, yeah, if you put Shemen, you're over an Isur. If you put Levayna, you're over an Isur. But if you put Shemen and Levayna, you're also only over an Isur. Maybe it's not going to be two Isurim. So it says the Braisa, La Yasim Aleh Shemen, V'la Yitin. Yachal, you would have thought that the only time there's two Isurim that you would be over for doing both is in the event it was two Kayhanim, Talmud Loimar, it says Aleha, and from there we learn Begufa mincha hakasim adabrav lebekayin. That what the Torah was told the Isser in was not the kayin, but more the mincha. Rashi says the word aleh sounds like we're looking at the mincha. We don't want the mincha to have shemen, and we don't want the mincha to have levayna. And if the mincha has shemen, there's an Isser. If the mincha has levayna, then there's an Isser. If we're looking at the Isser mitzat the chefza, then it doesn't matter if one kayin did it or if two kayhanim did it. If the focus is you should not do a ma'is in a sina shemen, you should not do a ma'is in a sina levayna, send this malkum to say if one kayin did it, even if he did both, and even though each one individually is an Isser, but at the end of the day, it's only going to be one Isser. Two kayanim will take be two Isser, but one kayin will be one, right? One kayin is one because it's one gavra, two kayanim are two because it's two gavras. But the Torah emphasizes alel to be madgish sakrashi that we're looking at it from the chefza perspective. The chefza doesn't care how the shemen and levayna got there. Doesn't matter if it's one or two. And being that it's two lavin in the Torah, so it's mistaber based on the way we always on the farish psuki Torah that it's going to be two lavin and not one, even if it was only one kohen that did it. Another Allah chazak debrai. So Yochel, I would think la yitin kli al gabi kli then nasan pasal that just like you're not allowed to put shem, you're not allowed to put levayna on top of the mincha. So maybe you're not allowed to put the shem and the levayna even if it's in a keli, and the keli is being put on top of the keli, right? You would think that that's also going to be a problem. Talmud loimar aleha begufa shel mincha kas medaber. The only time you're over the isser is if you put it on the gufa mincha, but if you don't put it on the gufa mincha, you're not going to be over the isser. By the way, if this halacha sounds familiar, it was the last halacha in the Mishnah. Nasan kli al gabi kli loy pasla, and this brayse gives us the makar. The makar is aleha has to be on the chefs of the mincha. So if you think about it, there's three things that we learned from the word aleha. Number one, aleha teaches me kazayas. Although in the case of Levayna, it says aleh twice, a ribe achariyat elamait, so the word aleh actually teaches me even mashahu. The second thing aleh teaches me is that the k'peidas mitzad the mincha, so if one kohen would put shemen and Levayna, he would be over two lav and two sets of malkias for what it is that he did. Number three, the word aleh teaches me it has to be on the gufa mincha, but if it's inside a keli, so the shemen and the levina was not directly on the mincha. That instance, you're not going to be over there. So either way, moving along to another very fundamental Mishnah that talks about very basic halachas in terms of understanding the differences between the Menachos. So, one of the tricky things about learning Masechtas Menachos is you almost have to know Masechtas Menachos in order to learn Masechtas Menachos, right? We never did a proper introduction to Masechtas Menachos because it was, I think, always highly impractical. Because what are you going to do? You're going to start talking about the 13 or the 15, depending on how you count different Menachos and all the nuances. I think we'd be out of business before we started. It would be very, very hard to do. But you go through the Gemaras, and then you figure out that some Menachos had Kmitza, and some Menachos didn't have Kmitza, and some Menachos had Shemen and Levina, and as we'll see in this Mishnah, Hagasha and Tenufa, and there's so many different nuances and halachas, right? All the limudim that we saw in yesterday's daf, in the Mahatzad, right? Some are in Isaron, some are like some are two Israelis. Some is one log of Shemen per Isarin. Some are three lugin of Shemen per Isarin. Some of them are shaykh to pigel. Some of them are not shaykh to pigel. Some of them are doiche Shabbos and Tumah. Some are not doiche Shabbos and Tumah. So again, there's so many nuances, right? If you're going to plot it out on a spreadsheet, you'd be like by letter J, I think, in terms of all the different variables and the chilukim between this mincha and that mincha. Really, the starting point in terms of understanding these technical things are the Mishnayos that we're learning. It was the Mishnah in yesterday's daf on the top of Daf Nun Tes Amud Aleph, and now the Mishnah here in Daf Samach Amud Aleph. So again, this was like an introduction that basically is saying that we're not doing an introduction, but we should just recognize that these are like very foundational Mishnayos, and hopefully 60 blot into the Masechta, they feel a little bit more comfortable as we go through them. But either way, so one of the mitzvahs that you find that the Torah talks about regarding a mincha is hagasha. Another one is tenufa. So these are usually thought of as like ancillary avodas. So in the zevach, you had smicha. Sometimes you had tenufa, you had shvicha shirayim, haktara to a degree. In addition to the core avodas, the dalat avodas adam. When it came to a mincha, you have the same thing. In fact, you have more such avodas when it comes to a mincha than you did when it came to a zevach. One of the big ones is Hagasha. Another one of the big ones is Tenufa. Our Mishnah is going to tell us that there was some Menachos that had Hagasha and Tenufa, some had Hagasha and no Tenufa, some had Tenufa and no Hagasha, and some had no Hagasha and no Tenufa. Now, what exactly is Hagasha and what exactly is Tenufa? So, Tenufa is something that's really going to be discussed more in tomorrow's daf, but for today's daf, as it relates to Hagasha, the mitzvah of Hagasha was for the kohen to take the mincha in its entirety. So this is before he did any kmitza. While it's in the klishares, right? When you do the kmitza, it's in the hand of the kohen. But to take the mincha, bring it to one of the corners of the Mizbeach, we'll see which, and for the keli to make contact, literally to touch the Mizbeach. That's what it was. That's what Hagasha is. So you take the keli, you go to the Mizbeach, and you do some sort of Hagasha with it. The oimik in Pshutei Shal Mikra is that the mincha was supposed to be brought to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But let's be honest, it's only the kaimetz that's being brought to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The rest of the mincha is not. By taking the entire mincha and doing the avodah of Hagasha, on some level, you're being makriv the entire mincha on the Mizbeach to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the oiftu. That's what the Hagasha is doing in the world of Pshutei Shal Mikra. But the bottom line is, there were some minchas that had some not. Either way, our Mishnah is going to tell us which yes and which no. Sagt the Mishnah, yesh tunas hagasha vein tunas tenufa, hagasha v'it tenufa, tenufa v'lei hagasha v'lei tenufa v'lei hagasha, ve'el tenufa is hagasha vein tunas tenufa. The following are examples of those that require hagasha and no tenufa. And as we spoke in yesterday's daf, this is al rishain v'al achrein. Okay, so which ones require hagasha and no tenufa? Minchas hasoiles v'hamachvas u'marcheshes v'hachalos v'rekikin. So these 5 menachos are the 5 types of minchas nedava that the Torah talks about in Vayikra Perek Beis. Right in the beginning of Parshas Vayikra, the Torah talks about 5 different menachas that could be brought nedava. One is when it was brought in a state of silas, and the other 4 are when they were baked or fried on some level. There was the machvas, the marcheshes, and then there was the minchas mafeitainer, which came either in the form of chalos or in the form of rikikin. By the way, all halachas that we haven't really explored yet coming up. But the bottom line is, these are the 5 menachas that the Torah talks about in the beginning of Vayikra. All 5 of them required Hagasha, unois tenufa, they did not require tenufa. Additionally, minchas koyanim, that's the mincha that a koyan brought, which is always unique. Why is the minchas koyan unique? Because it's kulei kol, right? It went entirely on the mizbech. There was no kmitza. You took the ganze zach and you put it on the mizbech. Uminchas koyan mashiach, also known as the minchas chavitin, the topic of last week's dafin. Uminchas nachrin, that's when a guy is menadav a mincha. Minchas noshim, that's when an isha is menadav a mincha. Uminchas chayte, that's in the event that somebody did an avera, which is oilav yoyred, and he's bedale dalas, so he's not bringing a behema, he's not bringing shnei torim or shnei bnei yaina, but rather he's bringing the mincha. So all 10 of these minchas, if you do the math, are examples of tu'unois hagosh ve'in tu'unos tenufa. Rav Shimon's chaylik. He says minchas kohanim u'minchas koy mashiach ein behen hagasha. The minchas kohanim, minchas koy mashiach did not have hagasha. Levisha ein behen kmitza, because there was no kmitza. V'chol ein behen kmitza, ein behen hagasha. And if there's no kmitza, there's no hagasha. Rashi says, by the way, the punchline of if there's no kmitza, there's no hagasha is not because kmitzas kilo with tanai and hagasha, but it's dafka a mincha that's mater shirayim l'kayanim. It's azasort mincha that shaykh to the avoda of hagasha, and being that over here the entire mincha is going on the mizbeach, you're not being mater or anything, so there's no avoda of hagasha. There's no avoda of hagasha. What's the oimek advarim? I think it's the svara that we mentioned earlier. The whole inyan of hagasha is to be mekayim a hakrava with the mincha that's not going to go on the mizbeach. But here it's going on the mizbeach legamri. If it's legamri going on the mizbeach, so there's no chelik that's being mutal l'sharayim. Right? That's what Rashi's being moisev. It's not the kmitza. I don't care about the kmitza. It's the fact that we're not being mat the shirayim l'kayanim. If it's kuloi kol of astafechtan hagasha, right? Think about it. I'm going to do a little hagasha to give it some zika to the mizbeach. The whole thing is going on the mizbeach. It's going to be kuloi kol. You're going to be makter l'reich nechayach. So why would I have to go ahead now and do an avodas hagasha? That's the svara of Rav Shimon. Either way, so the Mishnah, which notice ended abruptly, right? This Mishnah has a part 2 on Daf Samach Aleph from it out, because what happened to the rest of the list? What happened to the hagasha v'tnufas, the tnufas v'lei hagashas, and the loy tnufas v'lei hagashas? So that's all going to be mentioned in the next Mishnah. But for now, we have 10 menachos, if you do the math, that are tu'unois hagasha, they ain't tu'unois tenufa. What are they? The minchas soilas, the machvas, the marcheshes, the chalus, and the rekikin. Those are the 5 menachos that I mentioned in Vayikra Perek Beis, all the minchas nadava. And they have the minchas koyin and minchas koyin mashiach, that's 7. Minchas nachrim, minchas nashim is 9, and the minchas chayte is 10. According to Reb Shimon, minchas koyin and minchas koyin mashiach not, so you only have 8. But according to the Tanna Kama, it's 10. It's Amar Rapapa is like Alecha, the Tanan, Eser Tanan. Whenever you have this list of 10, you should know it's 10. My kamash, what's the chiddush or Papa? Lafuke b'der Reb Shimon. He's coming lafuke b'der Reb Shimon. The Amar who said mechzachal so mechzer kikin yavi. Kamash will underline. Reb Shimon has a chiddush that if somebody wants to bring us in a dava, a minchas mafei taner, and he wants it to be half chalis, half rekikin. So again, chalis and rekikin are 2 different ways you can bake the minchas mafei taner. So if he wants to cut it in half, he wants half this way, half that way, it's okay. From the fact that the Mishnah mentions 5 ways of bringing a minchas nadava and not 6. That's the loikir Reb Shimon. And that's what Rav Papa said, Kol heicha d'tanan esetan. What's he's trying to bring out? It's 10 and not 11. What do you mean not 11? Well, what's the 11th? The 11th would have been that there's 3 types of mafei taners. In the world of Minchas Nadava, there's a Minchas Soilis, there's a Machvas and a Marcheshes, and then there's a mafei taner that's kuloi chalois, a mafei taner that's kuloi rekikin, and a mafei taner that's mechza chalois and mechza rekikin, kamach one not. And by the way, if this Gemara sounds familiar, better, because we just had it on yesterday's daf. The Gemara made the same exact observation regarding the list of yesh tu'unois shemen vilavayna. Moving along, Zok the Gemara, mina hani mili. Mina hani mili, that what? Mina hani mili, how do you know that these 10 menachos required hagasha? So clearly not all menachos required hagasha. So mina hani mili, how do you know that these menachos required hagasha? It's a very, very straightforward question, right? It's 3 words. Mina, hani, mili. Stating that the answer is going to be a rather long answer. It's a fun answer. The answer is the Tanu Rabbanan, right? It's a brisa. This brisa is going to take us from the words the Tanu Rabbanan, which is 5 lines from the bottom of Daf Samach Amud Aleph, all the way to the Mishnah on Daf Samach Aleph Amud Aleph. So if you like brises, then you're going to enjoy the rest of today's daf. This is a fun brisa with mahatzad, setitzach levedik. It's geschmack. But the bottom line is, the answer to this question is the Tanu Rabbanan. And really, I think to appreciate this question a little bit better, the Minani Mili is not just on how do you know these 10 menachos require hagasha? As we'll see as we go through this brisa, as we plow through it, as we chayrish it, we'll see that the Minani Mili is really on all Menachos that require Hagasha, Minani Mili. And by the way, on the Menachos that don't require Hagasha, it's the same question, Minani Mili. So really, in order to understand and appreciate better what the Minani Mili is posing, so you have to learn the Mishnah that we just learned. Those are the 10 examples of Menachos that are Tunais Hagasha, they ain't Unais Tnufa, but you also have to refer to the Mishnah Daf Samach Aleph Amud Aleph, because the Mishnah over there mentions additional categories. Now, if you look at the Mishnah there, the Mishnah mentions that the Minchas Ha'omer and the Minchas Kanois, they were also Tu'unois Hagasha. The reason they're in a separate category is because they also require Tenufa. So they're in the category of Tu'unois Hagasha with Tenufa. So if somebody asks you, how many minchas needed Hagasha? You'd say, what do you mean? 10. Rav Papa made a big deal about it. No, it was only 10 that are Tunais Hagasha, ve'ein Tu'unois Tenufa. But there's another category that's Tu'unois Hagasha, and that is the ones that have Hagasha and Tenufa. The one that has Tenufa and no Hagasha doesn't have Hagasha, and the one that has no Tenufa and no Hagasha also has no Hagasha. But in terms of understanding, the ones that have Hagasha, so there's the 10 of the Mishnah, minus 2 according to Reb Shimon. Additionally, there's the other 2 that I mentioned, the Mishnah Samach Aleph Amud Aleph, Minchas Ha'omer, Minchas Kanois, which we'll see will feature extremely prominently in the brayso that we're going to go through. And by the way, just to be clear, as it relates to Hagasha, really, there's no chilik between the Minchas Kanois and the Minchas Ha'omer that are mentioned in the Mishnah Samach Aleph Amud Aleph versus the 10 Menachos that I mentioned here, right? It's all the same Hagasha. It just chaps a nafkamina whether it needs Tenufa, doesn't need Tenufa, which in the world of Limudim we'll see will play a nafkamina. But in terms of Hagasha, really, if you're going to plot down all the Menachos that require Hagasha, I would lump them together on one list. I think it's Pasha. The only chilik and nuance is klap Tenufa. The other thing is, what emerges from the Mishnah Samach Aleph Amud Aleph, if you do the work, you'll see is that the Shtei HaLechem, the Lechem HaPonim, and the Minchas Nesachim, that's a big one. So the Shtei HaLechem, the Lechem HaPonim, and the Minchas Nesachim were also examples of Menachos that did not require Hagasha. So you have the 10 in our Mishnah plus the 2 in the next Mishnah, 12 in total that required Hagasha. We know what they are. And then there's the Shtei HaLechem, Lechem HaPonim, which are these quasi-Menachos, but the Minchas Nesachim, that's a big one, right? That's a top 5 Mincha of all time. That Mincha also didn't require Hagasha. And really, in this Minani Mili, we're going to have to figure all these things out. We're going to have to go through all 10 Menachos of our Mishnah, plus the 2 of the next Mishnah that are Tunais Hagasha, and then we're going to have to go through the 3 Menachos from the next Mishnah that are not Tunais Hagasha. In total, it's going to be 15 Menachos that we're going to have to go adarich to figure out why yeah, why not, what the Mekayr is, and that is why we have this very, very long brayso. Either way, without further ado, so I think before we even start the brayso, let's just read one pasuk. The pasuk that mentions Hagasha. So where's this pasuk? It's in Vayikra Perek Beis. That's where the parsha of the mincha is. It's pasuk ches. Vehivesa es hamincha asher yeyase me'elo l'Hashem vehikriva l'koyin vehigisha el hamizbeach. Zeo. Vehivesa es hamincha. Bring the mincha asher yeyase. That's being brought. Me'ela l'Hashem. Right, you see there's some verbiage here that's lending itself to drasha. Vehikriva el hakoyin. Give it to the kohen, and the kohen is going to do the avodah of Hagasha. V'higisha el hamizbeach. So says the brayso, ilu namar vehivesa asher yeyase me'ela l'Hashem v'hikriv el hakohen v'higisha. Let's say it would have said everything it says without the words es hamincha. Vehivesa asher yeyase me'ela l'Hashem v'hikriv el hakohen. And by the way, it could have easily said that. Why could it have said that? Because we know we're talking about a mincha, right? Vayikra Perek Beis is mincha. But even if you're not sure, look at the pasuk on top of that. In minchas marcheshes korbanechos soilis b'Hashem eteyasa. So we know we're talking about a mincha. So why did Torah have to say vehivesa es hamincha? Meaning, had it said vehivesa and skipped the words es hamincha, it would have said asher yasa v'chulu v'chulu. You see, I would have thought only elo shetan hagasha elo kaimitz v'vad. I would have thought that it's only the kaimitz that requires hagasha. It's the chelik that is asher yasa me'ela l'Hashem. The part that you're actually makriv, that's the part that requires hagasha. Mincha minayin. How do you know the rest of the mincha? Talmud loymar mincha. It says the word Esa mincha, and from the word mincha, just dasale, and you see it's the entire mincha. So why did the Torah say Esa mincha? So you should know that it's not only the kaimetz. It would be misleading. You would think maybe it's only the kaimetz. Kamashman, then know that it's the entire mincha. Which, by the way, this havamina is counterintuitive to the svar that we had said earlier. Meaning our svar that we said earlier, that the purpose of agasha is for the chelik that's not going in the mizbech. That's l'fiyah emes, that you taku do agasha with the ganze mincha. But if the language of the Torah would have been Asher Asal Hashem, I would have said Shteitin Pasuk Nishtazai. Shteit, it's only the kaimetz. Why? I don't know. Why on a lot of dinim and kachim? The bottom line is this is what the Torah says, Kamash Malan. Anyway, now we're moving over to the next part of the Brisa, which takes us all the way to the end. And that is the Mekairis. Some Menachos do need Agasha, others don't. Most do, only a few don't. Why? Yeah, why not? Now, one thing that the Brisa is not even going to address, which Tos talks about on the bottom of Daf Samach Amud Aleph, Dibra Maskal Minchas Chaytim Inai, which by that's a very important pshat tov Tos after you go through today's daf. But Tos over there speaks out that even though we're trying to figure out Minani Mili, but that's pashit to the Brisa, so we're not even going to address it, that the first 5 Menachos mentioned in our Mishnah, the 5 Minchas Nedava, the Minchas Soilas, Marcheshes, Machvas, and the 2 types of Mafei Taner, that's pashit required Agasha. And the reason is because of the pasuk. This pasuk's in the parish of the Minchas Nadav, and it's telling you clearly the Minchas Nadav you do Hagasha with. You don't need Makairis for this. Now Tos speaks out that even though it says in Minchas Marcheshes Karbonecha, so maybe it's only the Minchas Marcheshes, I hear, but it says Ve'ivesas HaMinchas She'yaseh Me'ela Lasha. What's Me'ela? Me'ela means the whole sugya, the whole Vayikra Perik Beis. So really, any mincha that's mentioned Vayikra Perik Beis, that's pashit, that it requires Hagasha, and really we pick up then from the 6th mincha. So the other 5 mentioned in our Mishnah, and then the 2 mentioned in the next Mishnah. Those are the ones that are not mentioned in Vayikra Perik Beis, scattered throughout the Torah, and those are the Menachos that the Gemara is really trying to focus on now. So number 1, Minchas Chaytim Minayin. How do you know the Minchas Chaytim? Minchas Chaytim was number 10 on our list. Say the Minchas Chaytim required Hagasha. Talmud Leimar, it says Es HaMincha. And from Es HaMincha, the way most Rishonim learn it, Es is L'Rabbi Shimon Amsuni HaYadarish K'Asen Shabbat Torah, and even though he was Pirish, Rabbi Akiva, who halacha k'maisa b'chal makayim, he continued in this grace avoda. So, from the fact that it says es mincha and es is always the rabbis, that's how we know that the minchas chayt is included. Zok the Brisa v'dinu. L'chayra, why do I need es mincha? Why do I need a pasuk b'chalal to be marba the minchas chayt la'agasha? L'chayra, I should be able to learn it without a pasuk. Why? Netmar, it says, now we have in our Gemara the word hacha, but if you take a look at the Shinu Gersais, they change it to have. Netmar have minchas chayfa, the netmar have minchas nadava. Right? It says bring a minchas chayfa, such as the minchas chayte, and it says bring the minchas nadava. These 5 minachas that I mentioned about Yikra Perik Beis. Man, minchas nadava to an hagasha, just like the minchas nadava requires hagasha. Af minchas chayva to an hagasha, it would make sense that the minchas chayva should be the same way. So why do I need a pasuk? V'dinu. Why don't you just learn with a binyanav, right? Just if you need agasha by these menachos, why would you think the other menachos are different? So the Brisa, I'll tell you why, because you could always argue the minchas nadavar required shem and levayna, right? It's included in 5 of the 10 that need shem and levayna, as opposed to the minchas chayte, we know that did not have shem and levayna. So maybe because it has no shem and levayna, it doesn't have agasha either. The minchas soite also did not have shem and levayna, yet the minchas soite did have hagasha. Right, it's from the 2 that I mentioned in the next Mishnah that had Hagasha and Tenufa, but the bottom line is the Minchas Soita had Hagasha. Of a Malam Minchas Soita, you can't learn from the Minchas Soita. She came to a Tenufa, right? That's in the Mishnah of things that also had Tenufa, as opposed to the Minchas Chayte, which did not have Tenufa. Okay, but Minchas Nadava Teichiach. The Minchas Nadava has Hagasha, even though it doesn't have Tenufa. Chazar Adin. At the end of the day, you can go backwards and forwards, you can go in circles, like meaning, there's a chilik between the Minchas Nadava and between the Minchas Saita. The Minchas Nadava has Shemen Alavayna, as opposed to the Minchas Soita, but the Minchas Soita has Tenufa as opposed to the Minchas Nadava. But what's the Tzad Ashava Shabahen? What do they have in common? Sheshava L'Kmitza, they're both Menachos that have Kmitza, and v'shavu l'Agasha. And as a result, they have Agasha. It's afani avi minchas chayte. Tain is the brisa. So why don't I learn minchas chayte as well? Sheshavu l'kmitza, which has kmitza, is tishva lehem l'Agasha. It should have Agasha as well. So tain is the brisa. Why do I need esa mincha to be married the minchas chayte? I should be able to learn the minchas chayte from a mahatzah between the minchas nadava and the minchas chayte. You're going to tell me mala minchas nadava that it has shemen and levayna minchas chayte teichiach. Mala minchas chayte that it has tnufa minchas nadava teichiach. The tzad hashava is that they have it in Hagasha. So this should also have it in Hagasha. Says the Gemara, I'll tell you why you need a pasuk. I'll tell you why you can't learn it from the matzah. Because mala tzad hashava shebehen shekein huchshu alavi ba'asher kiba'ani. A minchas nadava and a minchas chayte does not discriminate between the asher and the ani. As opposed to the minchas chayte, shlei huchshu alavi ba'asher kiba'ani. An asher can't bring, even an ani can't bring. It's only the person that was bedali dalos that was allowed to bring it. So being that it has this inyan, that it's so exclusive to such a small amount of people, so it's like a inferior type of mincha. So there's no way you'd be able to learn it from a ma'atzad between the minchas adav and the minchas chayte. Talmud Lomid. That's why I need esa mincha, and from esa mincha I learn. From Esna Mincha, I learn that just like the Minchas Nadava, so too the Minchas Chayte as well. Either way, how do I know that the Minchas Chayte required Hagasha? The short answer is, I learned it from S. So many halachas that we learn from that. S. It's learned out from Es HaMincha. Why do I need a pasuk? Learn it from a Mahatzad? Because there's a pircha on the Mahatzad. Now, as we're going to see, the Gemara now is going to jump from our Mishnah right to the next Mishnah. We're going to get into the Minchas Omer and the Minchas Soita. We're going to bring a Machlokes, Rav Shimon, Rav Yehuda, what the Makar is for those two Menachos respectively, how it is you know Hagasha. You would think that if you were going Keseder a little bit, we would theorize our Mishnah, right? Now it's a Bryce, it's not a Mishnah, I hear. But if you take a look at Rashi towards the end of the Sugya, don't look now, and if you look at that bottom Tosis that we mentioned earlier on Daf Samach Amud Aleph, it's Mavur from Rashi and one side in Tosfos that when the Gemara just said Minchas Chayte Minayin, and the Gemara said it's learned out from Esa Mincha, even though we mentioned only the Minchas Chayte, we didn't only mean the Minchas Chayte. We actually meant the ganze Mishnah. We meant the Minchas Chayte, and we meant the Minchas Nashim, and the Minchas Nachrim, and the Minchas Kainam, and the Minchas Kain Meshech. So really, all the Melachas of our Mishnah were technically just addressed now. The Gemara didn't say Mefurish. The Gemara said Minchas Chayte. We'll see there's a remes to it in the end of the Brisa. But the bottom line is, this is a spoiler alert, this is what emerges from Rashi in the end of the Sugya, and Tais is right in the beginning of the Sugya. And that is, that really what we just said from Minchas Chayte, they technically address the 10 Menachos of our Mishnah. The 10 Menachos that are Tunais Hagasha, they ain't Tunais Nufa. Either way, Rav Shimon Omer, this is all the same Bryce. Rav Shimon said that it says Vehevesa es hamincha, right? That's the beginning of the pasuk that talks about Hagasha. And from the word Vehevesa, we learn the Rabbi's Minchas Ha'omer Hagasha. From the word Vehevesa, we learn to be Marbe Minchas Ha'omer. V'cheinu Omer, what's the makar? Because it says regarding the Minchas Ha'omer, Vehevesem es Ha'omer Reishis K'tzirchem Alakoyin. And the word Vehevesem is a remes to this word vehevesa. Is it Gzeir Shava? Some say not, but whatever. The bottom line is vehevesem teaches me that the Minchas Ha'omer is included in the mitzvah of Hagasha. It says vehikriva. So vehivesa samincha sheyasa me'elu Hashem vehikriva el akayin. From the word vehikriva l'rabis mincha saita lagasha. When marba mincha saita v'cheinu oimer, it says vehikriv oisa elam mizbeach. It says vehikriv oisa elam mizbeach regarding the saita, that word akrava, and that's how I'm marba those two. So the first 10 we were marba how? Well, 5 of them I'm mafurish in the pasuk. The other 5 were marba from esa mincha. And as it relates to the other 2 from the next Mishnah, the Minchas Ha'omer and the Minchas Soita respectively, Vehivesa als Vehivesem is Minchas Ha'omer, Vehikriva als Vehikriv is the Minchas Soita. Now, Reb Shimon said, that why do I need a pasuk for the Minchas Soita? Why do I need Vehikriva, the Rabbi's Minchas Soita? He's not talking about the Minchas Ha'omer, he's talking about the Minchas Soita. Why do I need a pasuk for Dinu? I should have been able to learn it without a pasuk. Why? Uman Minchas Soita. Madach the Minchas Soita, she'ena tu'una tenufa. Tu'una Hagasha. Madach the Minchas Soita that has no tenufa. It has Hagasha, right? We just said it has Hagasha, not Tenufa. It's the 10th of the list of things that require Hagasha, no Tenufa. So Mincha Soita, She'tu'una Tenufa. the minchas soita that requires tnufa einay din shetuna hagasha, so certainly it's required hagasha. Now the fact that the minchas soita needs tnufa, that's mafurish in the Torah. So we know that the minchas soita needs tnufa. So if it needs tnufa, certainly it should require hagasha. So l'chayra, I should know pasha v'kal v'chaymer. No, because minchas soita came bachitin. You can't learn it from the minchas soita because the minchas soita has a chumrah that the minchas soita doesn't have, and that it was bachitin, as opposed to the minchas soita that was basa iron. I mean minchas ha'omer teichiach. L'chayra minchas ha'omer should be teichiach because the Minchas ha'omer also required hagasha, and the Minchas ha'omer was also brought sa'irin. So you see, just because something is brought sa'irin doesn't mean that there shouldn't be hagasha. But the man Minchas ha'omer came to una shemen levayna. Minchas ha'omer needed shemen levayna, as opposed to the Minchas soita. That's one of the two karbanos that have no shemen and no levayna. But Minchas chayta teichiach. Minchas chayta also didn't have shemen levayna and has hagasha. The chazar didn't leiroi zakirai zeh v'loi zakirai zeh. Again, what's leiroi zakirai zeh? The Minchas chayte and the Minchas ha'omer are not similar, right? And however, Hatzad Hashava Shabehen, what's the Tzad Hashava? Sheshava L'Kmitza. They both are a mincha. They both require Kmitza. The Shavu L'Agasha and the Shavu L'Agasha. Nu, it's Afani Avi Mincha Saite. I'll be married to Mincha Saite. Sheshav Solem L'Kmitza, which has Kmitza like them. Tishon L'Agasha. It should have Agasha as well. So Tain is the Braisa. Why do I need a reboy? Why do I need a pasuk to be married to Mincha Saite? L'chayr, I shall learn the Mincha Saite Mahatzad from the Mincha Saite and from the Minchas ha'omer. The Minchas chayta has a chumrah that it's bachitin as opposed to the Minchas ha'omer. That's true. But the Minchas ha'omer has a chumrah that it's ta'an shem levayna as opposed to the Minchas chayte. So between the tzad hashava of these two things, meaning the Minchas soita is not 100% like the Minchas chayte because it's bought sa'irin, but it's also not. But for that, I have Minchas ha'omer teichiach. It's not 100% like the Minchas ha'omer because the Minchas ha'omer required shemen alavayna, but for that, I have the Minchas chayte teichiach. So between the tzad hashava of the Minchas chayte and the Minchas ha'omer, I should be able to be married by the Minchas soite. Why then is it that I need a pasuk? Says the Gemara, I'll tell you why. Because it's because the Minchas chayte and the Minchas ha'omer have something in common, and that is that they were not allowed to be brought kemach. What did they have to be brought? Soiles. Soiles was more refined than kemach. Supposed to be minchas that was brought kemach. Being that it was brought kemach, you would think it also doesn't have agasha. It has this unbelievable kula. Kemach is fine. So for sure, based on that, you would think that maybe it has this kula as well. Talmud Leima ve'ekriva. That's why Reb Shimon needed his pasuk ve'ekriva to be marba, that the minchas soite is going to have agasha. So Reb Shimon said that the Minchas ha'omer needs hagasha. How do I know that? It says vehivesa. And the Minchas soita needs hagasha. How do I know that? Because it says vehikrifa. As it relates to the Minchas ha'omer, there's no cheshbon of what I could have thought, would have thought, should have thought. Just straight up, we have a pasuk, although we'll see the next Gemara. And as it relates to the Minchas Saite, there was a little bit of a shmooze that why do I need a pasuk? Why can I learn it from a mahatzad between the Minchas Saite and the Minchas ha'omer? And the Gemara said, mahatzad hashava, that they both have to be brought silas. Toimah b'minchas soita as a school, it can be brought kemach. Therefore, you would have thought that it doesn't require agash. Either way, Rabbi Yehuda Omer. So this last Gemara that brought the makar to the minchas Omer and the minchas soita from the hevesa and the hekriva respectively was all Reb Shimon talking. It was Reb Shimon Omer. Now Rabbi Yehuda was one of Reb Shimon's greatest bali plucked in Shas. He has a different understanding, a different formulation. Rabbi Yehuda says when it says vehevesa, it's the rabbis minchas soita lahagasha. Vehevesa is coming to be marba the Minchas Saita. So Reb Shimon said the Vehevesa was coming to be married the Minchas Ha'omer. It was Vehekriva that was being married the Minchas Saita. So Rabbi Yehuda goes, Mamish, Fakert. Vehevesa is the Rabbi's Minchas Saita, Lagasha. Vehenu Omer, it says Vehevi as Karbana Aleh. It says the word Vehevi regarding the Minchas Saita, which by the way is a Pella then on Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon said from Vehevesa I learned the Minchas Ha'omer, because it says Vehevesim by the Omer. From the Hekriva I learned the Minchas Saita because it says Vehekriv. If it says Vehevi by the Minchas Saita, just like it says it by the Minchas Ha'omer, so why didn't he just learn it from the same Vehevi? Ayin Rashi, Ayin Tosfos. But the bottom line is, according to Rabbi Yehuda, Vehevesa is married the Minchas Saita. What about the Minchas Ha'omer? Aval Minchas Ha'omer lo tzricha kra. The Minchas Ha'omer does not need a pasuk. The Minchas Ha'omer is something that we can figure out on our own. How so? Why would the Minchas Ha'omer not need a pasuk? My time. Medina Kassia. I could learn it from a Matzad. What's the Matzad? Mat Minchas Chayte. Here we have another round of this. Madach the Minchas Chayte she'ena tuna tenufa tuna agasha. Madach Minchas Chayte doesn't have tenufa and he's agasha. So Minchas Ha'omer tuna tenufa ena dincha tuna agasha. So the Minchas Ha'omer which had no tenufa certainly should require hagasha. Mat Minchas Chayte she'kein ba'chitin. Right, it was Balchitin, as opposed to the Minchas Ha'omer that was brought Sa'irin. But says the Gemara, Minchas Saita Teichiach. The Minchas Saita was also brought Sa'irin, yet what? It required Hagasha. But the Minchas Saita, you can't learn it from the Minchas Saita. You're not going to learn Minchas Ha'omer from the Minchas Saita. She came Balavar Ravain, the Maskeres Avain. Right, that was Mevar the Oven, whether the Saita was innocent or guilty. So you can't learn it from there. The Minchas Chayte was also not mevarer Ravain at the same time it had a Hagosh. Again, what's not Roy Zechariah? The Minchas Chayte and the Minchas Chayte and the Minchas Saita are not the same, right? Each one has its unique kula and unique chumrah. Stating that there is a tzad hashava can shavel the kmitza v'shavel hagasha that they need kmitza as a result they need hagasha. Afan niyav minchas ha'omer she'ashavsa lehem lekmitza tishva lehem lahagasha. So l'chayra, so too I'll be married with the minchas ha'omer from a mahat tzad between the minchas chayte and the minchas saita. What do you tell me, Mala minchas chayte? You can't learn from there. Why not? Because it's Balchitin, Minchas Saita Teichiach. Mal Minchas Saita that it's Mevarer Avain, Minchas Saita Teichiach. Hatzad HaShava is that at the end of the day it requires Agasha, so too the Minchas Ha'omer is going to require Agasha. And Rabbi Yehuda feared eyes, Umay Parchas. I don't know any Pircha on this. Ich weiß, ich kann Pircha. So if I don't know a Pircha, so good, this is the Makar. So I don't need a pasuk for the Minchas Ha'omer. The Minchas Ha'omer I know Mefurish based on Cheshbon. Says the Gemara, what's Reb Shimon going to say? But Reb Shimon, right? Reb Shimon had a pasuk. He says, Baruch Hachi, there is a Pircha. There's a tzad hashava between the Minchas Chayte and the Minchas Saita over the Minchas Ha'omer, and that is Shekein Mitzuyan. They're both Mitzuyan. What does that mean? They're both Mitzuyan. So these are things that can happen several times over the course of the year. The Minchas Ha'omer can happen one time a year. Tez Zayin Nisan. It's a mitzvah esesh as mangarama. That's the only time it was done. As opposed to the minchas chayte, that can happen ma'asim b'chol. The minchas chayte, rachmana litzlan, could also be something that often happens. So being that these are things that are mitzuyin, so they're mitzuyin, so maybe over there there's a din hagash. As opposed to that's not mitzuyin. Rabbi Yehuda, what's Rabbi Yehuda going to say? This is a geshmak. He says, adarabba, ham mitzuya tvei, because ham zimnin delay mishkachas la klal. I think this is more mitzuya. This happens, this is on the calendar. You look at your calendar, you have it. You don't look at your calendar and say, I'm going to have to bring a minchas chayte, right? No such thing. This is something that you literally book in advance. So this to me is more mitzuya. This is really a fundamental question, right? How do you define shchiach? How do you define matzah? Right? Matzuyin is miloshen matzah. How do you define matzah? Is it based on the potential of something being able to happen a lot? Even if maybe it's for sure never going to happen, or maybe the other side, if I know something's for sure going to happen even only once, and it can happen more than once, but it's for sure going to happen once, maybe that makes it more matzah, right? We always talk about Reiv ha'echos versus Reiv ha'kamos. This is different. This is not quality versus quantity, maybe, but the bottom line is, if something for sure is going to happen once, versus something that's not for sure going to happen even once, but may happen multiple times, which is the thing that's more matzah, that's at the core, that's at the heart of this machlokes over here between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. So the bottom line is, what's the sikum on the machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon before we go right in the Brisa? And that is, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, Vehi Veisas l'Rabbis Minchas Omer, because it says the word vehivesem by the Omer, and vehikriv is coming to be married by the minchas saita because it says vehikriv by the saita. Rabbi Yehuda says no, vehivesa is not coming to be married by the minchas Omer, it's coming to be married by the minchas saita because it says vehevi by the minchas saita. And in terms of the minchas Omer, you don't need a pasuk for the minchas Omer. The minchas Omer is so pashit. I learned it from a tzad hashava between the minchas chayte and the minchas saita, the my parchas. I don't have any percha. What did Reb Shimon hold? Reb Shimon held there was very much a percha, and being that Reb Shimon held that there was very much a percha, so that's for that reason Reb Shimon said that you need a pasuk to be married the minchas ha'omer. What's the pasuk? The pasuk is veivesem. It's interesting, I think, just as a nuance in the brisa, and that is Reb Shimon said his halacha regarding the minchas ha'omer, the minchas saita. Right? Veives is the minchas ha'omer, and vehikriv is the minchas saita. And then he spoke out. Why do I need a pasuk for the minchas saita? Why can't I learn it out from a tzad hashava? And he went through the whole exercise, and he flicked. He said, no, at the end of the day, you can't learn it from the tzad hashava. Regarding the minchas ha'omer, he never even addressed the exercise. Right? Till now, we're addressing it all over the place. We had it by the Minchas Chayte, and now we had it Reb Shimon had it by the Minchas Saita, but he didn't even mention it by the Minchas Omer. Reb Yehuda is like 180 degrees. Reb Yehuda I hold that's the one time that it actually works Lamaisa. So Reb Shimon felt he didn't even have to address it, whereas in Reb Yehuda's world, no, this is the way it is. Shimon, just to bring it out, is addressing Mahatzah by Minchas Saita, but not by Minchas Omer. Reb Yehuda holds that Lefia Emes, I need the pasuk by the Minchas Saita, but I don't even need the pasuk by the Minchas Omer. So according to Reb Yehuda, the Ma'atzad works 100%, and according to Reb Shimon, you don't even have to address it. It's not even worth mentioning ad kidei kach. That's how mufrich that mahatzad is. But either way, moving back to the brises, these next several lines are actually a little bit of a respite from the intensity of the brisa, and that is, so we said that from the word vehevesa, we're marba one of the menachos, right? According to Reb Shimon, we're marba the minchas omer, and according to Reb Yehuda, we're marba the minchas Saita. Says the Braisa, maybe we shouldn't be marba any other menachos from the word veivesa. Maybe veivesa is coming to teach me something else. Meaning it sounds like the word veivesa is extra. Hence Reb Shimon and Reb Yehuda's drashas respectively. But Tainas the Gemara, how do I know that the punchline of veivesa is a chiddush in Hilchas Hagasha? Maybe veivesa is coming to teach me you can bring. We're talking about the 5 different types of minchas nadav. It's going to Rav Shimon at 6, right? Mechza, chalis, mechza, rikikin. Maybe Veves is coming to say that anything you want to bring, even sa'irin, for example, as we'll see in the brisa. Maybe we're coming to say that if a Yachid wants to be menadev, a mincha of sa'irin, maybe that's something you should be able to do. Vidinu, and there's a makar to say this. Why? Tzibur maybe mincha menachitin chayva, or maybe mincha menasa'irin chayva. Right? The tzibur sometimes brings chitin, most times, and sometimes he brings sa'irin. Right? When does he bring sa'irin chayva? The tzibur, you have the minchas ha'omer. Is af yachid shemevi mincha menachitin nedava, yavi mincha menasa'irin nedava. Maybe that's what Veis is coming to teach me. So how do I know? It's a kasha on Reb Shimon and Reb Yehuda. How do I know that Veis is coming to be marba a mincha hagasha? Maybe it's coming to be mechadish, a new type of minchas nedava. Talmud loymar eila, ainli elo eila. It says Veis has a mincha sheyasem eila. Eila teaches me there's nothing else. Maybe when it says eila is coming to teach me something else. Maybe it's coming to say that if somebody says Harei Alai Mincha, you have to bring the Minchas Soilis, Minchas Machvas, Minchas Marcheshes, and the 2 types of Minchas Ma'afetan. Maybe that's what Eila is coming to teach me. Maybe Eila is not coming to exclude, but maybe Fakir, maybe it's coming to be Marba, it's coming to include, and it's coming to say that every time you say Harei Alai, you would have to bring all 5. Talmud Loymar, it says Mei Eila. And from Mei Eila, I learn Ratza Achas maybe, Ratza Chamishta maybe. Mei Eila for sure is coming to exclude. And that's coming to be Memayet, that if you want to bring 1, you can bring 1. So what then is Veivesa coming to say? So Eila then can't be coming to tell me that if you say Harei Alai Mincha, you're going to have to bring all 5, because Mei Eila already told me not that way. So if that's the case, so I can learn from the word Eila to teach me that it's only these 5, it's nothing other than these 5, and if it's for that reason, if that's the case, Veivesa can't be marba minchas nedava of sa'irin. What then is it marba? Something lahagasha? What? According to Reb Shimon, it's going to be the minchas ha'omer, and according to Reb Yehuda, it's going to be the minchas saita. We're not done yet. Reb Shimon said, Es ha-mincha l'Rabbi Shar Menachos. Es ha-mincha is coming to be marba Shar Menachos. Kigoyin, minchas nachrin, minchas nashim lahagasha. This is where Rashi says that this Reb Shimon is really the first drasha that we had in this brisa. Es ha-mincha is referring to the minchas chayte. It's Reb Shimon. It's the same drasha. It's not a machlokes. Even though Reb Shimon is arguing with Reb Yehuda in the brisa, this Reb Shimon is the opening line of the brisa. And what do you see mefurish? Es ha-mincha is not l'rabbi's minchas chayte. It's l'rabbi's minchas nachrim, minchas nashim. Right? That's what he's being moisef l'chayr. But it's the same shita as the original shita. And it's from here you see that it's minchas chayte and minchas nachrim and minchas nashim. We mentioned that Tosa on the bottom of Samach Amar Aleph, right, gets involved in this. What Tosa over there discusses is it also minchas kayanim and minchas kayim mashiach or not? Tosa stood on one side, he says yeah. So if you go with that one side in Tosfos, for our purposes, I think that's a smart choice. So basically, what would then emerges is that from Es Hamincha, I know Minchas Chayte, that was the opening line of the Brisa, and I know from Reb Shimon's Haisafit to that, Rashi says it's all the same Shita. So I know also Minchas Nachrim, Minchas Nashim, and I know from Toys on the bottom, Samach Hamad Aleph, on one side, that it's also Minchas Kayan and Minchas Kayan Mashiach. The bottom line is, that's how I know all of those five. By the way, why would Reb Shimon himself not have been marba from Esa Mincha, Minchas Kayan and Minchas Kayan Mashiach? It's Reb Shimon l'shitasai, because Reb Shimon in the Mishnah said that Minchas Kayan and Minchas Kayan Mashiach actually don't have a gasha, right? So that's what that's what Tosfos is discussing over there. Reb Shimon doesn't mention Minchas Kayan and Minchas Kayan Mashiach. So Tosfos, that's Reb Shimon l'shitasai, because Reb Shimon l'shitasai holds that the taka is no din over there. But either way, moving along, says Reb Shimon weiter, Yochel shani marba avshtei alechem alechem aponim. So we marba so many things, right? Think about it. We will marba the five that are mafurish in the Torah, the five that are mentioned in Vayikra Perek Beis. We will marba already the other five. We will marba the Minchas Koyanim, the Minchas Koyim Mashiach, with the exception of Shittas Reb Shimon, who holds not, but as far as the Chachamim go, plus the Minchas Nachrim, Minchas Nashim, and Minchas Chayte. We will also marba the Minchas Ha'omer and the Minchas Chayte. So we will marba a ton. Okay, so at this point, sounds like everyone's invited to the party. So why would you stop here? Yochel shani marba avshtei alechem alechem aponim. Talmud loymar. As much as you have all these ribuyim over here, it says Mei Eila. And Mei Eila, some tzveitim on today's brisa, Mei Eila is Mema'et. It says, no, the shtei alechem alechem aponim are out. So what's the kasha? The kasha is like this. The kasha is, I have a general ribuy of Esa Mincha. That was marba 5 Menachos. I have a general miyat of Me'ela. That's memayit something. So how do you know what to be married, not to be ma'it? Now to be clear, Minchas Ha'omer and Minchas Soite had very specific ribuyim, right? But as it relates to the general Esa Mincha, which is marba, and Me'ela, that's memayit, freit the Braisa Marra, it's the Rabbi Shamar Menachos, ulohitz ishtei alechem v'lechem aponim. So the Braisa, I'll tell you what, marba, ni Shamar Menachos, I mean marba Shamar Menachos, sheish mehen li'isha. It's because they all have a chelik that goes on the Mizbeach. Umoitza ni shnei alechem v'lechem aponim, as opposed to shtei that don't have any chelik that go li'ishim, and it's for that reason I'm going to be mayatos. In other words, where does it say the Parsha Vagash? It says about the Minchas Nadava. The Minchas Nadava has a chelik, the kaimets that went on the mizbeach. So it makes sense that if I'm going to be marbe esa mincha, it should be doimed to the Minchas Nadava, and the Minchas Nadava went li'ishim. So Mela, this is going to have to be something that goes li'ishim. Lechem aponim shtei alechem didn't go li'ishim. That's why it's nismai. Okay, v'alei Minchas Nesachim, right? Minchas Nesachim, which is Kula li'ishim yochel yehei te'una hagasha. Minchas Hasachim had a chelik that went li'ishim. In fact, it went kula li'ishim. So Minchas Hasachim should be included. Now Minchas Hasachim is the third mincha that doesn't have hagasha. It was the shtei alechem lechem aponim, and it was the Minchas Hasachim. So why is the Minchas Nesachim excluded? And it can't be because it doesn't have a chelik that goes li'ishim, because it did go li'ishim. Talmud loymar it says v'hikriva. V'hikriva is a mir. Freit the Gemara va'afikte v'hik. Right? Didn't we use already v'hikriva? What did we use v'hikriva for? Rabbis, right? What was it? Marba. It was Marba Minchas Soita. I'll leave it to Reb Shimon, right? This is Reb Shimon talking. So Reb Shimon already used the Hikriva to be Marba the Minchas Soita. So how could he use it now to be Memai the Minchas Nesachin? And for the Gemara, the Hikriva. It could have said the Hikriva, it says the Hikriva. And because of that, I have two halachas. Number one, I have a riboy, v'hikriv, and I have a miyut v'hikriva. I'm marba the minchas soita, and I'm mimayet the minchas nesachim. Says the Gemara, mar ro'is l'Rabbi Shamar Menachos u'lohitzi minchas nesachim. Meichatesi, that's what I should be mimayet from the hikriva. And this kasha is really the same as the previous kasha. The hikriva is a miyut. It doesn't say no minchas nesachim. It says be mimayet something. So I have esa mincha to be marba. I have me'ela to be mimayet. Now I have the hikriva also to be mimayet. But meichatesi to be mimayet minchas nesachim. Maybe be mimayet something else, right? Meichatesi. Maybe you should be marba minchas nesachim. Mimayet minchas chayta. But mehechatesi umar ras l'Rabbi Shamar Menachos ulahoitzi minchas hasachim. Again, if the hikriva was talking to the minchas hasachim, so that's why it would be mamai. Right? The riboy of the hikriv, just to bring out the point, is talking to the minchas soita. That's why I know to be married to the minchas soita. But the miyut of the hikriva is not talking to the minchas nesachim. So if that's the case, mehechatesi, that's why maybe I should be married something else and be married this. So the brayse marba nishar menachos shebois beklal atzma. No, all other menachos that we were marba are bois beklal atzma. They come on their own, just like the minchas adava comes on its own. I'm giving you a mic. The minchas nesachim in a baba klal atzma, which doesn't come on its own. So being that the minchas nesachim didn't come on its own, so for that reason it's dissimilar to the other menachos, and that's why it's excluded. Zok the Braisa weiter. Weil Minchas Kohen and Minchas Kohen Mashiach, boys beklal atzman, they were beklal atzman, right? Minchas Chavitin came on its own, a regular Minchas Adav of a Kohen came on its own, so Yochi Utunas Hagasha, I would think it needs Hagasha. Talmud Loimer, Vehigisha is Memai. By the way, this is Reb Shimon talking, right? So Reb Shimon is the one that holds that there's no Hagasha by the Minchas Kohen and the Minchas Kohen Mashiach. So Zok there, because it says Vehigisha. Vehigisha, I mean, by the Gufa, Shetuna Hagasha, right? First of all, the word Vehigisha, for sure, you can't be Vehigisha. How could it not say Vehigisha? If it didn't say Vehigisha, you wouldn't know about Hagasha. The only time it says Hagasha is right here. So I need the word Vehigisha. Vehigisha. Vehigish could have taught me the Ikar Halacha. Vehigisha with the mapik, hey, that's coming already to be made. So, again, so I have this general miyat of Hagosh v'higisha, and what do I use it to be mamayit? I use it to be mamayit the minchas koyanim and the minchas koyim Mashiach. Says the Rab Shimon Umar Rois leRabbi Shar Menachos Ulahitzim minchas koyanim and minchas koyim Mashiach. Mechatesi maybe be mar with the minchas koyim Mashiach, and maybe from Esa Mincha and be mamayit something else. Zok the Braisa, and this Braisa we'll see. Really, the answer could have been very straightforward, but it's a little bit of a sikum type of answer. Mar bani Shar Menachos, Amar b'the Shar Menachos sheyesh mehen le'ishin. That's why you weren't memayet from me'ela. Ubois biglal atzman. That's why we weren't memayet from the hikriva. V'yesh mehen l'koyhanim. Additionally, there's a chelik of it that goes to the koyhanim. Umoitziatni shtei halecha v'lechem aponim she'em mehen le'ishim. That was his mind from me'ela. Uminchas nesachim she'eda babiglal atzman. That's what was nesmayed from the hikriva. Uminchas koyim and minchas koyim Mashiach. This is the punchline. That's the davish and the schadish right now. She'em mehen l'koyhanim, because there was no chelik of it that went to the koyhanim, and being that there was no chelik that went to the koyhanim, it was kulay kol that went in ganzen on the mizbech. It's for that reason that too is going to be excluded. Let's just finish the brisa. Veherim. It says veherim, right? The next pasuk, right after the avodah of agasha, veherim akoyim and aminchas askarasa vehiktar amizbecha isherech nechayach Hashem. Yachal, but clear, you would have thought that the veherim should be with a keli, right? When it says veherim, lift up the chelik that's going on the mizbeach. V'hikter ha-mizbecha. You would think, do it with the kli. Talmud loyma v'herim mimenu bekumtzai. And it says somewhere else, v'herim mimenu bekumtzai. Ma harama ha'amr la'alam bekumtzai. Just like over there, it's in his hand, right? Bekumtzai means with the kmitza. Af harama amr kam bekumtzai. So to here, when the Torah mentions the avodah of kmitza, it means bekumtzai as well. But the bottom line is, this was a brisa, if there's ever been one. Started on the bottom of Samach Amud Aleph. It ended on the top of Samach Aleph Amud Aleph. Mamish, an amud and a half of Braisa. What was the mission statement of this Braisa? Right, every Braisa has a mission statement. What's the mission statement? What's the objective? What are we trying to accomplish with this Braisa? We're trying to figure out why the menachos that require Hagasha require Hagasha, and why the menachos that don't require Hagasha. Right? Which menachos require Hagasha? So it's the 5 minchas nedavas, plus minchas koyanim, minchas koyim Mashiach, minchas nachrim, minchas nashim, and minchas choyte, minchas ha'omer, and the minchas soita. Which ones do not require Hagasha? Lechem aponim, shtei halechem, the minchas nesachim, and according to Reb Shimon, also the minchas koyanim and the minchas koyim Mashiach. So what's the bottom line? What's the shortest sikum imaginable? The 5 minchas nedava that I mentioned before in the Torah, in the parish of Agasha, that's obvious. So that's easy. It says esa mincha, esas l'rabbis, and from there when marba, another 5, or according to Reb Shimon, another 3. But from there when marba, the minchas chayte, like it said mefurish in the brisa, the minchas nachrim and the minchas nashim, like it said mefurish in the Reb Shimon part of the brisa, and the minchas kan, minchas kameshich, at least according to one side, and Tosfos on the bottom of Daf Samach Amud Aleph. How do you know the minchas ha'omer and the minchas soita? That's machlokes Reb Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda. According to Reb Shimon, ve'eves is marba the minchas ha'omer and ve'ekriv is marba the minchas soita. According to Rabbi Yehuda, ve'eves is marba the minchas soita and ve'ekriv is like tzarchra. That I know from the matzah. That's the only matzah that was left standing after all the matzahs that we went through in today's daf. How do I know that the shtei alechem, the lechem aponim, and the minchas nesachim and the minchas koyan and minchas koyan Mashiach, according to Reb Shimon, are excluded? It's because there's a lot of exclusionary words in the parish of the mincha as well. Me'ela is exclusionary, ve'ekriva is exclusionary, and ve'higisha is exclusionary. Me'ela, everyone agrees, is me'mayit shtei alechem lechem aponim. The Hikriva, everyone agrees, is Memait the Minchas Nesachin, and Rav Shimon, who's also Memait, who's also Minchas Kohen Mashiach, he's Memait them for Higisha. How do you know what to be Marba and what to be Memait? Because really, with the exception of the Hevesa Hikriva, everything else was general. Es HaMinchas LaRabbis, Me'ela is a mi'at, ve'kriva is a mi'at, ve'gisha is a mi'at. So that the Gemara said that we try to be marba all the things that are the most similar to the Minchas Nadava, which is the Iker Parsha in the Torah that talks about the Avodah Vagasha. What's unique? What's unique is, number one, there's a chelik that went on the Mizbeach. Additionally, what's unique is that it's Babik Lal Atzmai, and according to Rav Shimon, you know what else is unique? What else is unique is, it was chelik that was Nachal L'Kayanim. There's a chelik, there's a Shirayim that was Nita L'Kayanim, as opposed to Minchas Kohen Mashiach that didn't have that exhale. So as it relates to raid, I mean, the truth is, I think today's daf was the raid, but at the same time, it's Shloshim Yom Koydem L'Chag, and we're also Shtikl Bal Chayiv on some raid. So going back to what we spoke about 2 dafim ago, and that is the inyan of Kala Menachos Ba'is Matzah, which we said, according to some Rishonim, is very much related to the inyan that on Pesach we have a mitzvah to eat matzah, and we're very much prohibited from eating chametz. We said that really, in order to fully appreciate the connection between Kol HaBenachos Ba'is Matzah and the avodah of chametz and matzah on Pesach, we have to have a better understanding of the avodah of chametz and matzah. And in the first Rebbe, we went through understanding a little bit better matzah zu shanu oichlan al shumma. I think that for today's shir, we should shift a little bit and discuss chametz zu she'ein anu oichlin al shumma. Why is it that a yid is not allowed to eat chametz on Pesach? So if you ask the man on the street, why not allowed to eat chametz on Pesach? What's he going to say? What's he going to say? You might actually stump him a little bit, because it's not mefurish in the Haggadah, right? Pesach, matzah, maror, that we know. That's mitzvah tzrichas kavanah, it's a mitzvah saseh. A loisase is not the inyan of mitzvah shrichas kavanah, right? So you're not mechavin not to eat chametz. Why is it that you're not allowed to eat chametz? I think the pashut pshat is, it's part and parcel. It's the flip side of the same coin of why you're supposed to eat matzah. You're supposed to eat matzah on Pesach, and that's matzah zu shanu oichlin al shumma. That we know what the reason is. It's because the Yidden didn't have a chance to allow the dough to rise because they were forced to leave Mitzrayim so quickly, and it's because of that we eat matzah. And part and parcel of making this very strong zecher to that inyan and of matzah is we say not only should you eat a kazayas of matzah, you're not going to eat chametz matzah, halayla zeh matzah, kulay matzah. You're only going to eat matzah. And the inyan is because we want to enforce the zecher of matzah. So really the iser chametz, what, it's a zecher for something specific? Yeah, it's a zecher for the matzah. So part and parcel of the matzah zu she'anu oichlin al shumma is this inyan of also not eating chametz. I think that's the pashut pshat. The emes is, if you think about the Issa Chametz, it's mamish a davar pella. It's a davar pella. Think about how chametz on Pesach is. For starters, chametz on Pesach is a loisase, right? Not let eat chametz on Pesach. If somebody eats chametz on Pesach, he's chayiv kares. Not only are you not allowed to eat chametz on Pesach, you're not allowed to have chametz in your possession on Pesach. By the way, not only are you not allowed to have chametz in your possession on Pesach, if someone does, he's over 2 lavin, right? There's a chaymer of 2 lavin. Tosfos and the Rishonim always discuss, asay is deicha lois asay. Can asay be deicha 2 lavin? It's a shmuz. 2 lavin is more serious than only 1 lav. You have the lav by your matzeh. On top of that, there's also an asay, the asay of tashbisu. So think about how many in every miyuchis sugya, chametz gets a shout out, right? It's in the sugya of asay being deicha 2 lavin. It's in the sugya of ein asay deicha lois asay v'asay. It's in the sugya of kares, right? It has mamish every yichus you can have. This has, right? Think about how chomer it is. It's an incredible thing. On top of that, the Rabbanon went, and the Rabbanon were even moisef. The Rabbanon said that chametz is asa b'hana. Not only is chametz asa b'hana, chametz sha'avar olav Pesach is asa b'hana. Right? It's August now. Yeah, but the you had scotch sitting in your house and you didn't sell it, you're not allowed to make a l'chaim with that now in Shabbos Nachma. It's chametz shalav Pesach. That's something that's going to be asabana. In the world of bittul, when you have a taruvos of chametz and a davar amuter, chametz we know is b'mashahu. So if you think about it, it's almost irrationally prohibitive. And it's very, very tzarech beer. What's the reason for this? Why would chametz be so chamer? You know who discusses this shaila? The Radvaz. The Radvaz. In Shailas Tshuvas Radvaz, in Tshuva, there's a lot of Tshuvas from the Radvaz Kiyadua, Tov Kuf Ayin Zayin. This is 977. The Radvaz was asked this question. Someone asked him, Man nishtana chametz bepesach mikol yisurim shebetayr. Why is it that chametz and Pesach is so different than all the other Isurei Torah? And he went on and mentioned everything that we just spoke at and more. By the way, the fact that in order not to be everybody rabbi matzeh, so you're supposed to do bittul chametz and hamavatul tzarich sheyivdai, right? It's mind-boggling the amount of things that we do. And the Radvaz goes through and he explains the shaila of the shaila very nicely, and he tells him there's zero precedent for this. Not only is there no precedent, he says even avodah zara, where it says v'lo yidbak biyotcha me'uma min acherim, which avodah zara is shakul kineged. It is not as chamer to have an avodah zarah sandwich in your refrigerator as it is to have chametz b'Pesach. And it's a pella. The shayil asks this to Radvaz, and he taka no havana. And Radvaz says, I have two mahalchim how I can answer this question. The first mahalach, which he spends the majority of the tshuva discussing, is a mahalach that at the end of the day he says, I don't prefer, because I feel it has holes in it. So as a result, ayin sham. Take a look at Tshuvas Radvaz, Tshuva 977. But then the Radvaz says, I'm going to tell you the pshat that I think is the pshat. And that is, Al Masha Amru Razal. I'm relying on what Chazal said in the Medrash. Ki chametz bepesach, chametz on Pesach, remez li Yetzirah. It's a remez to the Yetzirah. Vu sa'or shebe'isa. It is the proverbial sa'ar shebe'isa, the sourdough of the dough. It's for that reason, the person has to make sure that he's going to get rid of it from himself. And he has to search every crevice of his machshavos. And you have to make sure that you eradicate it completely, and you don't even leave over a kolshu. What I'm telling you now is emes v'nach. So says the Radvaz, I was mispointed in the Issa Chametz, the fact that you're not allowed to eat it, and if you eat it, you chayiv kares, and you can't even have it in your rishos, and if you do, you're over 2 lavin, and an asay, and the fact that it's asabahana, and even chametz sha'ava all of our Pesach is asabahana, and the fact that even if you mevatel it, so you're not over by your rabbi matzah and tashbisu, but I feel hachi you have to do a bedika, and even if you have a mashu left over in a taruvos, I feel be'elef loy bottle. Said I was misboinin, and the only rationale, the only explanation I can come up with is al keina nisoymach hamash amru azal b'midrashos, that the chametz in the Pesach is the sarsha be'isa, and it's for that reason you have to get rid of it, you have to eradicate every trace of it. And if Rahman al-Litzlan, there's one trace, you never know what that can ultimately lead to, and it's for that reason, afilu amashu, you have to have a perfect clean bill of health. Because if there's a little bit there, that in of itself could be very, very dangerous. Now, what's this medrash that the Radvaz is referring to? So the medrash that he's referring to is a Zohar HaKadosh. It's in Rai Mehemna. It's in Parshas Boy on Daf Mem Amud Beis. So the Rai Mehemna goes through all the different isurim that you have on Pesach. Vayisa ames betzeikoi terem yechmatz. Zok the Rai Mehemna pikuda da levar chametz. This pasuk is teaching us the mitzvah to do bir chametz. And he goes on to explain, I'm skipping a little bit, because we know the Chaverim said on the pasuk Sar lo yimatze bevatechem v'rosa ikimno ben chametz u'matzah dekama duchti, that the chiluk you always find between chametz and matzah is da yetzirah v'da yetzatayv. That the matzah is the yetzatayv and the chametz is the yetzirah. So Sar lo yimatze bevatechem and vayisa ames b'tzekei terem yachmatz, and the Issa Deiraisa by Rabbi Yamatzah and the mitzvah the Rabbanon of B'dik chametz is all related to the inyan that the chametz is the Yetzer Hara And it's for that reason, on Pesach, you have to get rid of the Yetzer Hara. This is the medrash that the Rav Vaz was referring to. And he says, Al Kenan Yisoymech Al Divi Razal b'Midrashos. This must be what's going on over here, and this must be why it's so chamer, the inyan of chametz on Pesach. Now, the truth is, the fact that the Yetzer Hara is referred to as the Sar Sheb'Isa, everybody knows that. Where do you think the term Sar Sheb'Isa comes from? Right, it comes from that inyan. It's a Gemara Masechtas Brachos, Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. The Gemara says, Alexandri Basa the Matzli Amar Hachi. When he would finish davening, he would say the following tefillah: Ribaynoi Lamnin, Goliv Yadu Lefanecha, Sheritzaynenu Lasis Ritzayncha. Umi ma'akev sa'or shebe'isa v'shibud malchiyos. He ratzei milfanecha shetatzilenu miyadam v'noshav lasis chukri tzanech v'levashal. So Alexander used to say a tefillah, and he would say that, Eibush, you know how badly you didn't want to serve you. But you know what gets in the way? The Sar Shebe'isa gets in the way. Who's the Sar Shebe'isa? It's the Yetzer Hara, Zakrashi. So you see already, Rabbi Alexandri referred to the Yetzer Hara as the Sar Shebe'isa. It's mefurish in Zohar HaKadosh that's the inyan of Bir Chametz, a bittul Chametz, and it's for that reason, Dr. Advaz, it's the only way I can make sense of this inyan. Truth is, I saw that Bar Benel, Afenard, here in Parshas Bay. He says, why is Chametz so serious? Why is it so chamer? That Bar Benel, the ultimate pashtan. A Bar Benel, who learns Pshutei Shal Mikra, right? We know this from the Chumash Yirim, Shayin Einmal. Bar Benel learns exactly like the Radvaz. He says the Pshat has to be, because the Chametz represents the Yetzer Hara, and there's an avodah of the Yid on Pesach, he has to get rid of the Yetzer Hara. Now the truth is, you have to think about this for 1 second. On Pesach, there's an avodah of getting rid, that's what the whole Chametz business is. Right? This is what this is all about. And this is what it's about. Yeah, it's a shaykhis to matzah, but come on, it doesn't explain it. How can chametz be so much more chametz than matzah if chametz is like a sif cotton in matzah, right? The teretz is, no, chametz represents the Yetzer Hara, and on Pesach there's an avodah of getting rid of the Sar Shebe'isa, eradicating every little trace, because any little Yetzer Hara that a person has in his machshav even could, Rachmana litzlan, one day become a very, very big problem. What does it have to do with Pesach? What does it have to do with Pesach? Pesach is man cheruseinu. I would think that this is an elul digavoida. I would think that this is something you do may Rosh Hashanah, Aseret Yimei Tshuva, Zicha Yom Kippur. Right? I would think Yom Kippur, don't eat chametz. That sounds like a good idea, right? Thou shalt not eat chametz on Yom Kippur. That would make a lot of sense, because on Yom Kippur, don't even have it in your house. Bal Yeira, Bal Yematzeh, right? That's what you would think would be a perfect inyan, because it's a zman of tshuva, and in the zman of tshuva, you have to fight Yetzer Hara. That's what tshuva is. So you have to have charat alava and kabbalah alasid. So what you should do is you should take an oira there. You should be baidik b'chayre stocking, and this is going to be ma'ira you very, very much to understand b'pnimius what you're really trying to do. And by you going ahead and by you doing that like this, you're going to be able to get rid of the Yetzer Hara. What's the shayches? What's Pashup Shat? What's Pashup Shat? What's the correlation? What's the connection between this avodah and with the avodah of Pesach? And again, sometimes you learn a medrash, you learn a chazal. Okay, this is al pi remez, al pi soid. Maybe it doesn't have to be so matir with the Pashup Shat. But Rav Vaz is telling you this is the only way I could learn the parsha. I have no understanding of the chaymer of chametz unless you tell me the chametz represents the Yetzer Hara, and by us getting rid of chametz, we're somehow internalizing b'pnimius this idea that we're getting rid of our Yetzer Hara. And the Bar Benel said the same exact thing. So if you have two 16th century goyim that are telling you the same exact thing, and that's saying this is the only way we can give Zach an Eitzah with the parish of Chametz, that means there has to be something very, very strongly correlating this Avodah and Pesach. Because I don't think there's anything that screams Pesach from the rooftops more than Chametz, or the lack thereof. So what exactly is the connection? And there has to be a Pasha answer to this. If the answer is not Pasha, you're wrong. You can't come up with a pilpul. You can't tell me a Chakira. It has to be a Pasha answer. But I think the answer is Pashut. I think it's so Pashut that's why we overlook it a little bit. And that is, before the Yidden left Mitzrayim, they brought a carbon Pesach. Why did they bring the carbon Pesach? The pasuk says, Mishchu k'chu lachem tzayin. Mishchu yetchem me'avodah zara u'k'chu lachem tzayin shel mitzvah. When we learned the Chumash in Parshas Bay, we spoke about the Rambam and the Boira, and some interesting Egyptology raid about how the Egyptians were notorious over the avodah zara, and one of the primary avodah zaras that they used to worship was Mazel Tleh, the constellation of Nisan, which is the Tleh. And it's for that reason the Yidden were told, take their avodah zara and shecht it, slaughter it, and give it up to who? To the real creator of the world, give it to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Before the Yidden left Mitzrayim, they were told, listen, Chevra, we're leaving. We're going to go away from 430, 400, 210, 116, 86. You're getting rid of that whole terrible, traumatic chapter in your lives. But before you leave, you need to detach yourself from the culture of the Egyptians. That was the Korban Pesach. And it started with taking the carbon on the 10th day, and they had to do Beaker for 4 days. It was a tremendous avodah. But before the Yidden left Mitzrayim, they needed to detach themselves on some level from the culture of Mitzrayim. And that meant Mishchu Yetchem Me'avodah Zarah. And then afterwards, Ukchu Lachem Tzayin Shal Mitzvah. That was the avodah of the Korban Pesach. It would seem that the avodah of chametz is very much related to the avodah of the Korban Pesach. The Yidden were told, you're going to leave, but in order for you to leave, you have to attach yourself from the avodah zarah, beseder. And that's going to be done with this one incredible Pa'ula, and that is take the avodah zarah, the Egyptians, a suicide mission, and bring it as a carbon, literally to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But in addition to that, every single person was told that he has to go ahead, he has to be mevar the chametz from his house, which meant don't have any chametz inside your neshama. Take the chametz out of your guf, out of your machshava. That's part and parcel of the avodah. This is not some Gishmaka Indian that you find in Sfurim HaKdoshim that relate to the Yontav HaPesach. No, the Yidden left Mitzrayim after they brought the Korban Pesach, because the first thing they had to do was Mishchu K'chu Lachem Tzayin. So they had to first detach themselves from the Avodah Zarah. Part and parcel of detaching themselves from the Avodah Zarah, part of this Avodah was to go not just to the symptom, go to the source. Right, the Avodah Zarah is the symptom. What's the source of these problems? It's all the Sar Shabisa, Mi Ma'akiv, the Sar Shabisa. So if you can get rid of the taiva comes from the Yetzirah. So if you get rid of the Yetzirah, you knock out the taiva, the gaiva, the kin, everything goes along with it, right? So what they were told is you have to go to the shayrish. And that's why every year Pesach, when the Avodah Chazit Zechibur again, Mishchu Yetchem Me'avodah Zarah, get rid of the Avodah Zarah and understand Emunah, understand Bitachin, understand HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Avodah is, we get rid of the Chametz because we understand that the Chametz represents the Sar Shabisa, and being that the Chametz represents the Sar Shabisa, that's the avodah of the Yid on Pesach. This is not some agav de gezach. Think about what the Yidden did when they left Mitzrayim. First they got rid of the avodah zarah, and then they left Mitzrayim. That's what we need to do. That's what it means to prepare for Pesach. Prepare for Pesach means mishchu yetchem. It means what? Just make sure you don't have a crumb in your house? Yeah, that's what it means in the Olam HaMaisa. But let's be honest, if somebody figures out a way to get rid of every crumb, but he never thought about the Sar Shabisa was licked him in the neshama. According to the Radvaz, according to that Barbanel, he missed the whole sfina. He mamish missed the whole point. He missed the whole point. Rachman al-Tzlan. It's very hard to prepare for Pesach. And again, we have to do it. These are mitzvahs. But at the same time, you get a lot of schar for doing it. But in terms of the Sheirish mitzvah, understanding the pnimius of the mitzvah, Zok to Advaz, Zok to Abarbanel, this is the Pashup Shaf. I have no other way. So again, when you hear the Sar Shabisa the next time, it's not masses. It's not Chsidish Torah. It's not Sfurim HaKdoshim. This is Pashup Shaf in the mitzvah, Zok to Advaz, Zok to Abarbanel. I just want to be Messiah with a Marumokim Nefla that I found. Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach. I found this in the Haggadah from the Chidah. So the Chidah wrote a Haggadah, it's called Simchas HaRegel. And in the beginning of the Haggadah, as a Hakdama, he has what he refers to as Gimel Limudim. He says there's 3 Limudim, 3 Musar Zachin that you could take out of the Leila Seder. And he writes, Kedarka, a beautiful pilpul on these 3 Limudim that you could take out. The first limud is related to kol chamira de ikir b'shusay, the chazisi or the loy chazisi, the va'arte or the loy v'yarte, liftov lahavak afredara. Talks about the Indian of bir chametz, and he says as follows. He says, "V'kvar nishal haradvazal b'tshuvoisav hanitfasas chadoshes me'ata ba'ashkenaz simin tof kufayin da above." He says Radvaz was already asked such an obvious question. He was asked that I understand why is chametz on Pesach so chamer? Ma nishtanu chametz b'Pesach mishari surim shabbatayra. Karis, you can't even have it. Tulavin, and Aseh, Asa Bahana, Chamish Aval of Pesach is even Asa Bahana. It's b'mashu, you have to do bittul, you have to do bedika. And the Chida brings the mahalach of the Radvaz. He said that pshat is al kein ani soymech al divrei razal b'midrashis, and that is that the chametz represents the sar shebeisa. And when you understand that it represents the sar shebeisa represents the Yetzer Hara, you know how serious it is if a person has a little bit of Yetzer Hara inside of him. You have to get rid of it. Chalila, you can't have a dot of Yetzer Hara. So you're right. If you think of it of chametz as a crumb, then it just feels a little right. Maybe we're overdoing it a little bit, like we're overplaying our hand. It's the Yetzer Hara, a little bit of Yetzer Hara in the machshava from a mensch, Rachmano, is like take the whole person down. One day that Yetzer Hara can creep up and it's over. So that's a very, the Mishnah says, right? The Yetzer Hara is very, very dangerous, and that's why when you fight the Yetzer Hara, it's b'mashu. You did bittul, I don't care. You better do bedika too. It's in a taruvas. What do you mean it's in a taruvas? I don't care if it's in a taruvas. That mashu can always come and rear its ugly head, and it's for that reason it's so chum. See, the Chida brings the kasha that the shoyel asked the Radvaz, this beautiful, beautiful question, and he brings the teretz of the Radvaz and says the Chida, he says, your eyes are now seeing very, very clearly. Shaharav zechrein levracha, referring to the Radvaz. Pishpeish v'loy matzah tam l'chumras chametz asher echmiru t'ayr v'razal. He said he was pishpeish v'loy matzah, right? This is pun intended. He searched and he tried looking this way and looking that way, and he could not find any mahalach al pi apshat vadin. He had no eitzah. And he was forced to come to the remes. The Radvaz writing a tshuva. He doesn't read the Barbanel, but we found it in the Barbanel also. He said he had absolutely no mahalach how to do it. V'nimtza shaharemes shalachamitz hu apshat. The remez of chametz is the pshat. Ki kol hachumroi sa'elu lo'erer ha'adam shetzorich lehisrachik ma'oid min ha'yetzer hara u'lechapes b'choyrei v'sitkei chadrei libay im shemetz davar nimtza by lemaher levare u'lesarfa. This is what the yid has to do. Ulizar ma'oid b'bayirah b'yimatzei kulei aiva ulai yinatzal mimenu. And then kedarkei, in a poetic way that only the Chida was able to write in. He goes and he talks about this Inyan. How beautiful is that? V'nimtza Haremesh al achametz hu hapshat. Poshit boktein. Haremesh al achametz hu hapshat. Chida says a lot of things in that limud aleph. It's mamish beautiful, ayin sham. But I'll just tell you one, and we'll end with this. And that is, we know one of the most basic halachas of bittul chametz is ein bittul chametz ela b'sreifa. It's machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim how you mekayim the mitzvah of tashbisu. But we do it with sreifa. It says, why does it have to be with sreifa? Ein bittul chametz ela b'sreifa. So he says that if the whole Indian of chametz is really just a remes to the Yetzer Hara, that means what the Torah is telling you is that the way you get rid of the Yetzer Hara is with sreifa. You have to burn the Yetzer Hara. He says, how do you burn the Yetzer Hara? What does that even mean? So he says, the Gemara says, Mesechtes Kedushin barasi Yetzer Hara ubarasi Torah taflin, which means the one way for a yid to overcome the Yetzer Hara, there's one way and one way only, and that is, it's through Torah. Torah is nimshal esh. You know how you soirif the chametz? You know how you burn the sar shebeisa? It's with the fire of Torah, zok the Chida. And the Chida says that I want to tell you. He says, I've seen a lot of people, they try to be ma'ira people of tshuva. Some people do it with nice shmuzin, and some people do it this way, and some people do it that way. It's all gevaldik. It's all gevaldik. But he says at the end of the day, the only thing that has staying power, the only way a yid can actually get rid of his Yetzer Hara, ein bittul chametz ela b'sreifa, Chazal said. It's the only way you can be mekayim the mitzvah of tashbisu is by burning it. It's through Torah, and it's a mefurish Chazal. Barasi Yetzer Hara, barasi Torah tavim. Shalom says right in the beginning of the sefer that the Torah told you this is the only thing that works, and if the Torah is telling you it's the only thing that works, the doctor told you this is all that works. So no, what are you gonna do? You're gonna fight with the doctor? There's nothing else that works. The only eitzah is the Torah, but it's not just the Torah; it's the fire of the Torah. That's the eitzah. You overcome the Yetzer Hara. It's with the fire of the Torah. A person can learn Torah and it's not fire. It's fire. As long as we say fire, it's fire. This is the takeaway. You want to know what the lesson is? fight the Yetzer Hara. We fight the Yetzer Hara this way, that way, and the other way. But at the end of the day, Barasi Yetzer Hara, Barasi Torah Tavlin, and the Yontif of Pesach from all places. Who would have thunk it? The Yontif of Pesach teaches us this incredible Musa Haskell, and that is the Pashib Pshat of the Chametz is the Sosha Isa. It's the Gemara Brachos Yud Zayin Amar Aleph. It's the Rai Mehemden Parshas Bay Daf Mem Amar Beis. We have to manage. This is something. This is coming as news to me. So it's something that we all need together. Have to process a little bit and try to make sense of. But at the end of the day, the way we're mekayim the mitzvah of Tashbisu is ba'esh tisroifu. We throw it into the fire. It's the fire of Torah. When a person engages himself in the passion of learning, he immerses himself in the eish of Torah, he realizes there are things that are more geschmack and sweeter and more fire-dig than all the tanugeh and havlei olam hazeh. That's the way to overcome the Yetzer Hara. We should be zoicha through the eish of Torah, kulei hai, v'ulai yinotzel. But we should be zoicha to have some level of gvura over the Yetzer Hara.